to another episode of the Within Reach podcast. And once again, I am joined by my co-hosts. On my right, I have Crystal.
Hello.
And on my left, I have Anthony.
Hello.
How are you guys today?
I am wonderful. Thanks for asking. I'll steal the mic off for Anthony. Recently learnt that my hair looks lived in. Thank you, Steph.
Well, just before we went on air, I was, Crystal mentioned her hair is quite fluffy and frizzy, but I actually think it looks lived in.
And it's a new term I've heard, so thank you. But I guess on more like a genuine note, I think we were speaking about this earlier at coffee today, that these past 2 weeks have kind of turned a shift mentally in terms of things that like better energy lately. And I think it's from figuring out my own priorities and setting myself some clear goals and printing off my 3-month goal action plan.
Good.
And
Good to hear you've done that.
yeah, I finally printed it off. So I guess like having those like to-do lists forever in my head, and it can feel quite overwhelming. Now it's on paper and clearly set out. I'm feeling really good.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. So you felt like the last couple of weeks have been a bit stressful?
Yeah, I'd say last few months, to be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, now I kind of figured things out in my head of like directions I want to go in and some clear goals, and making some more time for me and like social life too, because we can be forever on the hustle, like working and training and feeding it all in, but making some time for me lately, which has been really nice.
Yeah, I love that. Do you know what else as well? Like, I've noticed the shift in you over the last few weeks since that call that you and I had a few weeks ago, and we were kind of navigating our way through, I guess, the planning and the organization phase for you. You do seem a lot more upbeat. Don't you reckon she's more upbeat?
100%.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I love it. And what about you, Ant? How are you?
Yeah, fantastic. Vibes are definitely up, energy's up as well. And I would have to say I feel like the year has only just begun. I feel like we are getting to the point of the year where I'm like being more consistent, being more on track. Everything's going really well. And I feel like just ready to like take action and move so much more forward.
Yeah. Do you know what's so interesting about that? Because I completely agree with that. And you were actually the person who said this to me the other week. It's like, even though we're in like the end of March, it's like the year's only just starting now. And I don't know if our listeners can agree, but the three of us are like,
I feel that completely.
yeah. It's like the first 2 months of the year have completely flown by, but also it felt quite unproductive. It was like we were trying to find our feet again. And then March is like where you you're able to go, right, these are actually my priorities. These are actually the things that I want to do. Now we've got to start actioning them. And to be fair, there was a little bit of fear in that. I'm like, holy shit, the year's already nearly at the first quarter, like done. So
it's I don't know if I did mention this to you, but actually energetically and astrology wise, the year of 2023 just closed on Thursday.
That's so interesting.
wait, what do you mean?
So
Rabbit hole.
So there's no real way to put it. Explaining it isn't going to make a whole lot of sense, because I have a very good friend, Jess, who is like deep into astrology, and basically how the stars and all of that sort of stuff line up. It's like 2023, basically the energetics of it lasts until the closing of like the what would I say, like astrology year.
Yeah, right. We might have to get this Jess on the podcast to explain it, because I have I don't follow that sort of stuff, so I have no idea, but
Yes.
I'm interested to learn more. Open to learning.
Yes.
Open to learning.
Always open to learning. But back to you, Steph. How has you been? How have you been?
How has I been?
Yeah.
How is you?
I've been good. Like, I can 100% relate to what you were saying, Crystal, around like just how I've been feeling lately. I noticed that I went through a big dip kind of the end of February in towards mid-March, where I just felt like I was lacking a lot of self-confidence, self-belief in my vision for like the business, the brand, and just what I was doing in life. And I've had a bit of a wake-up call and some clarity come through over the last week or so. I went to 2 business events over the weekend, which were amazing, and it allowed me to kind of reignite that spark. And yeah, it's interesting because when you're looking at the life of like social media and you're seeing and comparing yourself to people around you, which we all do and are all bad for, it can look like everybody's taking 10 steps every single day to, move forward. But actually, the amount of times that people sit in lack of self-belief or lack of clarity, or have to take 2 steps back in order to take 10 steps forward, and then you think that you're falling behind. That's kind of where I was. I was thinking, oh, I'm so far behind everybody else, and everyone's making so much progress and being so consistent. And here I am, like sitting in my corner, feeling sorry for myself. But we actually all go through it.
Mm.
So yeah, it was nice to realign myself and to realize that actually this is human nature. It's normal and it's something that is okay. Because when you're trying to move a million miles ahead every single day, like sometimes you actually just need to pull the pin for a minute and relax and
Mhm.
rest and slow down. So that's kind of where I've been the last few weeks.
And it sounds really exciting. I know that over coffee this morning, we discussed a lot,
Mm.
and though the coming months are really exciting.
Yeah.
exciting.
So we're really excited for you guys to hear a bit more about what is going on in our world in the coming months and how you can get involved. But let's jump into today's topic. So today, guys, we're actually going to be speaking on something that I'm very passionate about, and I'm sure you guys are too, which is all about building phases. So in previous episodes, if you've listened to our previous episodes, we've spoken about fat loss phases, and we've gone down the rabbit hole with scale weight, those sorts of things. Today, it's time to turn the tables and speak about the other end of the spectrum. A lot of people come into coaching, or they decide to work on a goal, and it's usually related to either one or the other, whether it's a building phase or a fat loss phase. So we want to be able to dive deep today into building phases, how they work, what to expect, what you need to understand, the things and the trends that we notice in those phases. And then these are going to be real life tips that you can implement if you are looking at entering a building phase. For both of you, have you guys both been in building phases before?
Yeah, when I actually first got into training in the gym, I started a building phase. Again, very not knowing much about it.
Mm.
Although, yes, that was basically the first building phase I was ever in.
What about you, Crystal?
Yeah, so it was after my first half marathon, and I spoke about this on a previous podcast where I lost my cycle and I needed to build my bone density back up. So that's when I went into strength training. So yeah, I have done it for a little while, and then I was purely just doing strength training and stopped running for a while.
Yeah, cool. And so with myself as well, like I've actually done building phases in the bodybuilding sense when I was preparing for shows. So it's going to be interesting to kind of unpack this, because I think we all have similar understanding and opinion, but also different experiences around building phases. Who would like to give the building phase kind of explanation?
You go ahead. This is your forte, by the sound.
Okay, I'll do it. I'm trying to share the load here. So yeah, for those of you at home listening, or wherever you are in the world, kind of going, I've heard about building phases. I'm not 100% sure what they are. A building phase there's 2 ways that we can look at it. Technically, a building phase is where we're focusing on building muscle mass and being able to prioritize strength and performance in that period. Building phases can also be a building of scale weight. So there is, to a degree, like a level of intention behind them. But for the purpose of today, we're going to be speaking about entering a building phase for the purpose of building muscle mass. So with this, there's a couple of things that we want to remind you that are very important when it comes to building phases, because so many people do these wrong. And some of the risks that are involved if you don't know how to do a building phase properly is around gaining too much body fat, training too hard, not recovering, and also not getting to your goals because you're not focusing on nutrition. They both go hand in hand. So when it comes to building phases, Ant, let's start with you. What is 2 things that you notice frequently can go wrong when someone's trying to do a building phase without the proper education?
I would have to say, I'd say the biggest one that I most commonly see is like the bulk, or like the gym bro going on a bulk and just eating any type of food and not really worrying about nutrients of the food or anything like that. It's purely just to get the calories in, which again is great, although there is better ways to do it. And yeah, I would just say, knowing, I guess, through my journey of that,
Mm.
how beneficial it is to actually eat well when you're on a bulk, or in that stage of phase, is really important. The other thing I would just say is like knowing how to progress in your training is another thing. I would say, like, rather than going in doing the same thing day to day, you actually need to know how to progress forward in that building phase.
Yeah, I actually really love both of those. Let's start with the first one because that brought up a lot of things for me. So
Mm.
you are right in what you're saying. And I think, Crystal, this is going to be your forte here around like the level of adequate and like good nutrition when it comes to building or bulking, because I have seen so many people kind of go, I'm going to bulk. And then it doesn't matter about the quality of food, the quality of
Dirty bulk.
nutrition. Yeah, they just like raw dog it. They go like, they go into like the dirtiest bulk you possibly can and just have like all the foods, which is great. But if you're not prioritizing health, there are a few things that can go wrong. That one's pretty common.
For sure. I think tracking is going to be important when it comes to bulk, in your build phase. I think for women, the terminology bulk might seem a little bit scary. So more so build. And in terms of nutrition, if someone has like never tracked before and then just goes to eat everything, it can jump up with body fat quite quickly. So for someone that's about to start, I would start their like work out their total daily energy expenditure and honestly start them at maintenance to build a base and then slowly increase it. And yeah, so not jumping up the calories like too fast. Otherwise we will have more body fat than muscle as we would like.
Yeah. And like going back to the level of health as well, you want to be able to have like optimum health when you're doing a build. I think people just think that like if you're eating a lot of food, it's good because you're not starving. It's actually, it doesn't mean it's a good way to do it. What were you going to say there?
No, I just completely agree. Like, I remember watching like Ronnie Coleman videos of like him just eating through like every hour of the day and just being like, I'm not hungry, but like I'm on a bulk. And it just be like just copious amounts of food, and he just wouldn't be happy. Just look like he'd hate life.
Yeah.
And yeah, that just brought up the vision of my
That's so interesting. So yeah, there's a couple of things that can go wrong when you are starting a building phase. If you're somebody who's like, I'm going to start building, and then decides that they are going to just eat everything in sight and not prioritize health, it's not going to be good for like your optimal health, of course, but also the way in which you can perform, you can recover. I think a lot of people forget that even if you're not dieting, like health is still important. We need to be able to get our nutrients in, get our vitamins in, a good level of fruit and veg. These sorts of things will help the body function properly. And without them, there is a risk that you are going to be eating a lot more than you think you are, particularly if you're choosing like high calorie, caloric dense foods or like a lot of takeaway. It's not an excuse to just go and eat lots of takeaway. But I love the point you brought up as well, Crystal, around how people can just gain like copious amounts of body fat. That happens quite often, hey?
Yeah, it can, if especially if someone's not working with a coach and they're just winging it and not having a proper plan, especially with their training and like progressively overloading in their training to build that muscle. Otherwise, they're just eating the food and not doing the work.
Yeah, for sure. And that's it. It's not about the more you eat, the better, because the more you eat, the more risk you have of putting body fat on. And then what happens when you get to the end of the build or the bulk? You've then got all of this extra body fat you have to lose. So you're just going into a really strong, very aggressive building phase, which then in turn means there's a risk of you having to go into a very strong, aggressive dieting phase. So it doesn't really make sense to just go like hell for leather when it comes to building. There is still a structure you need to follow. So the second thing that I wanted to bring up though is when you were just saying, Crystal, before about how we need to be making sure that like we understand nutrition and maybe find our maintenance. How would someone do that if they don't even know what maintenance means?
Well, work with a coach and that would definitely get you started. Look, there is energy like calorie calculators online if you are trying to do it yourself, and you can also work out like how active you are, going off like how many steps you do a day, how many times you work out, what job do you do, are you sitting at a desk, are you walking around, to work that out. You do have, if most people have watches these days that will tell them, but they're not always 100% accurate either, that people have to keep in mind. So if someone is trying to do it themselves, then yes, there is calculators online, but that's not always going to be perfect. So working with someone that has experience is going to help you a lot. And then once you have that number and start tracking it and eat like that for a week and weigh yourself at the start, the end of the week, has your weight stayed the same? Has it increased? Has it decreased? And that's a good way to tell if you're eating your maintenance or not.
Yeah, and like maintenance or just calorie calculators, they're based on averages. They're not 100% accurate anyway. So you are right in what you're saying. As long as you test, it's like testing the waters. You got to go through test periods. So if you have never done a building phase in your life, or you've never really thought or understood nutrition, finding your maintenance, hanging there for a week, or even sometimes a couple of weeks, like 2-3 weeks, and just seeing how are you progressing? Like, are you staying the same? If you are, that's actually a really good sign that you're maintaining. That's what maintenance is, maintaining your current body weight. And then if you're losing weight, you can go, oh, okay, cool. So I'm accidentally in a deficit. I'll just bump these calories up like 100, 150, no more than that. Don't be too crazy with it. And then if you are noticing you're gaining weight, like more than say 500 grams a week, I would be reducing those calories by, again, 100 to maybe even 200 to allow yourself to like find the maintenance. I think the most common thing that I see, and I've actually done myself in the past, is assuming that you just build calories up every single week, or you just constantly increase. But that's not always the way forward, is it?
No.
No, not at all.
Do you want to speak to your experience with your build phase coming from like the bodybuilding side of things?
Yeah, well, yeah, okay. So when I first started like in the fitness industry, before I even became knowledgeable in the nutrition area, so like, God, this is probably 2018 now, I decided I was going to go through this bulk. I was like, going to go bulking. Yeah. And I definitely did Gym Bros. That's exactly how it was for me. So I was training, doing my own program. But don't get me wrong, I was training hard. Like, I was training the house down and training 6 days a week. Like, my training was probably the best at that point it had ever been. But my nutrition, I was just bumping my calories up like every other week. And so I was really lucky because I did build a substantial amount of muscle mass, although a lot of it was newbie gains because my body wasn't used to the stimulus. So that was just an added bonus. But over the course of 6 months, like, I put on, I think, 10 kilos. I went from 60 kilos to 70 kilos. And the more weight that I gained, the happier I was because I thought I was doing it right, until I reached a point where I realized like how much body fat I'd put on. Like, I'd put on probably 5 kilos of muscle mass, which is pretty impressive for 6 months. But I'd also put on about 5 kilos of body fat I had to then try and lose. And so I learned really quickly that just bumping calories up for the sake of it is not the way forward. Like, it's not the way to do it.
I think it's really positive that you wanted to go into a bulk phase. I think it's something for women where they can get quite scared of the scale weight going up. So how did that make you feel? Like, were you excited that your scale weight was going up?
Yeah, that's such an interesting point, isn't it? Because so many women, and I don't know about men, like if men are like this as well, but so many women are so scared of seeing that scale weight climb to the point that if it goes up even like a couple 100 grams, they freak out. It's so interesting. I saw you read the post I put up in our community forum yesterday, and that was all about scale weight. And I was saying in the post, I was like, no wonder women are scared of the scales or scared of body weight gain or just a bad relationship with it, because like in our generation of growing up, the thigh gap was a trend. Magazines had the front page plastered with how somebody lost 10 kilos in 2 weeks, and it was celebrated. And then they were blasting celebrities all over the internet and social media on how they'd gained weight or lost weight. And it definitely has, like, the societal norms have crept in and people have then been scared to like gain weight. For me, I don't know why, but I was just oblivious to it all.
That's good.
Yeah, like, I knew that was happening. And if I flash back to my high school days, I was definitely like very self-conscious, very focused on how I looked. Like, my appearance really, really mattered. But I was just determined. I was like, I want to build muscle. I want to be a weapon in the gym. Like, I want to complete change. And I think for me as well, like, it helped that I got out of my environment because I studied my course, then I moved to Sydney, and then I went like ham with fitness and then decided I was going to do this build. So when the scales were going up, I was like celebrating it.
That's awesome.
But yeah, you're right. It doesn't happen often.
No, I think for me, I was in a good place where I was excited to be building muscle because I knew it was positive for my health overall. But I like to focus on having a strength goal and like making it still a performance goal in the gym. So I was like, yep, I want to like increase my squat, I want to increase my deadlift. And that, yeah, took it away of caring about the scales because I was more excited about lifting heavy in the gym and building my strength gains.
And I think this is where it's really important, like in both of those comments that you both said, is the goal around it or the reasoning why is
Yeah.
like
Yep.
so important. And because we now have the knowledge behind why we do it and the right ways to do it, it's almost like, well, of course. But for those people that come at it from a uneducated perspective, maybe when they see that going up, they know that maybe it's not the right thing to do or that should be happening.
Yeah, yeah, okay, that's a great point. So it's like the amount of confidence you have in the process based on the education that you have. That is such a good point because you are right. Like if you are educated, if you understand it, if you know what to expect, then when it happens, you're not freaking out going, "Why is this happening?" Whereas if you're a little bit unsure, a little bit unconfident, or you're really just not all in with the goal and you're not doing it for the right reasons, chances are you are going to have that freak out moment. In saying that, I do definitely think like previous belief systems over scale weight can affect people's ability to feel comfortable being uncomfortable in a building phase. And so even if I reflect like on clients I have now, I have a couple of clients actually. They won't mind me mentioning their names, I'm sure. Steph Newman is one of them. So she dropped 20 kilos in our dieting phase. Well done to her. And then we've now put her through a reverse phase, which we'll touch on. We'll touch on what reverses are. But she's through her reverse and now starting her building phase. And another one is Jacinta. So Jacinta lost 12 kilos.
Wow.
And now she's finishing her reverse, moving into a build. The thing that I've noticed with women like these clients that I'm working with is because they started a dieting phase with me and I was so big on education from the start of like, this is what to expect, this is what we're doing, this is the goal, this is the end result. And we kept realigning every check-in with them. By the time it got to the end of their deficit, I'd already kind of like had those conversations on, okay, these are the next steps. This is what to expect moving into a building phase. And they were able to gain trust in the process that now they don't seem uncomfortable in this build. But I know for other people who maybe don't have that experience or education or a support system for it, it can be really hard to stick to it because they get uncomfortable in the process because they don't really trust the process to begin with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it definitely does. Spaz, what about your experience with being a male? Since we spoke about a lot of the female experience now.
Definitely. So I would say a lot of what I have seen is the bulking from the guys, and it has, from what I've seen again, has been the dirty bulk because I guess the education isn't quite there for them, or possibly they don't mind about putting on the body fat. I feel like from a man's perspective, they may look at it from like, well, what's going to get me to that goal the quickest? And if I put on a little bit of body fat, it's my body, I think. I think there's not sort of that stigma or relationship connection with the body that the females have.
Yeah, that's so true. I have noticed that. Like, it's very true that men seem to, and we're not general. Well, we are generalizing, but we understand this is not everybody's story and
Correct.
everyone's case.
Yeah.
But generalizing, men do seem to be a lot more comfortable putting some extra like mass on, and then women they don't always feel comfortable, and that can hold them back. It's so interesting to notice the differences. Like it has to come back to like belief systems and what we were taught growing up. It has to.
Definitely. So it was very much, I guess, generalized that, like, even going back ancient times, is like the actual bigger you were as a man meant that you were more wealthy because you could eat more food.
Yeah, I actually no, I've
Yeah.
heard that. I've
Yeah.
actually heard that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess also coming back to ancient times, it's like a princess had to be like beautiful, spectacular, like all these things. But it's in the day and age, it's like everyone's actually perfect in who they are. And if you're working towards a goal, it's like, how can you get there sustainably and actually be educated in that goal?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it does really come back to society and how through generations it's changed, and the beliefs through those generations. So very much it's changed over time, and I do really believe that if you want to look a certain way, that's completely fine. You don't have to worry about what other people think about it. So I forgot the question.
Well, on your point of people wanting to look a certain way, like most people that I've worked with or that I've spoken to, a lot of women want to spot fat reduce. And as we know, we can't do that. Like we can't just choose a spot. Yep, I want to lose fat off my tummy. But the amazing thing about going through a build is that you can target a muscle to grow.
Yes.
And then when
It's the complete opposite.
yeah, exactly. So then once you go into that fat loss phase, you're revealing the hard work and you've created more shape.
Yeah, and actually on that as well, like love what you said, because I've said this to people before as well, that you can actually choose where to build. You can build it all over your body, you can target certain muscle groups. So like as you said, it actually allows you to prioritize that spot, bring up areas that you want to bring up. But the beautiful thing about it is the fact that once you've done all that hard work and you do diet back down, you can uncover all of the hard work that you've built. It is interesting because I've had experiences where people have actually come to me and they've explained how they want to look, and they've gone, this is how I want to look. And so I want to diet, you know, I might want to lose 5 kilos and get leaner and get toned. Emphasis on the word toned. And it's so interesting because a lot of particularly young women that come to me, like girls in their 20s, and they go, I want to, you know, get lean and get toned and I want to diet. I'm like, actually, dieting is not what is going to help you here or serve you. What you think is going to get you the result is actually the complete opposite. So someone will come to me and say, I want to, you know, drop 5 kilos so I can get leaner, I can get toned. When can we start? And I'm like, well, we can, but actually you want to build. You actually want to build because toned, ladies and gentlemen, is not a thing. Toned is not a thing. Toned is not a thing, just in case you missed it the first 2 times. Building and toned are the same thing that you're talking about. So when you're thinking about like a toned, lean physique, it's actually muscle mass underneath that is revealing that like toned look, right? So what we need to understand is that if you are somebody who wants to get toned, you actually want to build. And I know the word build or bulk can, again, be scary for some people, but it is literally the same thing. And what happens is they go, I want to get toned in my arms and toned in my legs. And when you're building muscle, you're actually filling out that area with muscle mass that is going to help you tighten up through the skin. It's going to help you grow in those areas, create shape in those areas. And so many women want, you know, they want the curves, they want the hourglass figure, they want the big glutes and the big legs and the big shoulders, but you're not going to get that from quote unquote toning. And then for the men, I feel like you guys just like want big everything. But same thing, like it's not toning that you're after. You actually need to commit to a building phase. And for some reason, people still think that that word is 2 different things.
Yeah, I think also for women when they do want to go for that tone because the build or bulk seems scary because I guess we always want to seek validation subconsciously. And if you're not getting that validation from the scales or the mirror, I would also suggest like doing a hobby or some skill work. So it's kind of, again, taking it off
How you look.
and the scale weight because you're working on other things that you get validated by and fills up your cup.
Yeah.
Definitely. And
I love how you said, It seemed like you were
delicious.
so interested. Yeah.
well, I agree. It was
Yeah.
yes. And yeah, I do feel like most men have I would say, perception that they are actually, I guess, not as close to their goal as they think that they are. So I feel like most men, from, again, coaching, from friends speaking to most men in the gym, is like the self-image is portrayed as like they are either smaller than what they are, or they want to look more like someone that is bigger than them, or even it's like just they aren't satisfied within themselves. And I feel like that could potentially be the same connection with women. However, they're always striving for something more than what they currently are.
Yeah.
And I feel like if everyone was to find more gratitude in their goal and actually just focus on themselves rather than comparison
Mm.
is where it's actually going to be helpful towards them.
Yeah, when you were saying that, that's what I was thinking of, is comparison for sure.
Mm.
So yeah, we've, I guess, kind of uncovered a few different points that are really important for people to reflect on in their own journeys, and also to know like a lot of this stuff is completely normal and it's okay to be scared. It's like scared of the unknown because you're doing something different, particularly if you've grown up in a space where you've either always tried to diet and then you're trying to build. It's going against everything that you've always tried to do.
Well, how long should someone be in a build for?
Well, yeah, that's what I was kind of going to go into, is like understanding the concept of a build now, because you need to understand it. So, great question. How long should someone be in a build for? Absolute minimum you should be in a build, and I'm talking absolute minimum, is 3 months. I wouldn't even recommend that. Like, I would recommend 6 to 12 months for sure. And when you're going through a build, you have to understand that a build is a few things. It's a build of calories over time, it's a build of training intensity over time, it's a build of strength over time, it's a build of a lot of things, and they all go hand in hand. So a build should be 6 to 12 months. You can even push it out longer. The longer you're in a build for, the better. The longer you're in a build for, the better that you're going to be able to, the better you'll be able to adhere to it. The more confident you'll get in it, the more results you'll also get in it as well. Do you guys have anything to add there?
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yes. I love it.
It takes time.
Yeah.
Quite literally. And the expectation, like, rather than setting your sights on the short term of it, yeah, really look into the future and be like, this is something long term that I can do, and it's going to continue to build over time.
Yeah. And then with that, so yeah, we want to be in that period focusing on increasing training intensity and then increasing nutrition slowly. Let's stick on the nutrition and we'll go to the training element after, because we've already kind of touched on nutrition. So just to kind of reiterate for you guys, find your maintenance. That's the most important thing, because if you find your maintenance, you're going to be confident and know that there's no likelihood of you under eating, because if you're not eating enough, there is not enough food coming into the body for you to actually be able to build. So I want you guys to, like, let's set the scene, okay? Let's set the scene. Your human body, right, is always trying to keep you safe. Your body is always trying to make sure that you're also functioning properly. And if we really think about our body and what the most important vital functions are, what would they be? They'd be the heart, the lungs, the kidneys, the organs, the brain, all of your functions of your organs, like the most important thing, because that's what keeps you alive. So if you're eating food, right, where do you think the energy is going to go first? Well, it's going to go to all of the things that are necessary to keep you alive, because we can't build if we're not alive, right? So we go, all of our energy will go to those areas first. And then whatever's left over will go to the secondary important things. And let me tell you guys, your body does not see building muscle important at all. It's like one of the last things that it needs to do or wants to do. So we have to understand that if we're not eating enough food, the energy is going to go to all of the vital functions first. And if there's nothing left over, then you're not going to have energy to build muscle, because the body, it's not going to prioritize that, only if there's extra there. And then on top of that, if you are not eating enough protein, there's not going to be enough coming in for you to also build and repair muscles. I've had 2 instances where people have thought that either A, if I eat protein, that's enough for me to build muscle, regardless of how much they're eating. Wrong. And 2, if I eat enough food, it doesn't matter how much protein I eat. Also wrong. So we need to understand that, like, the optimal, and guys, you want to do it optimally. Like, if you're going to do something, you want to do it right. You want to do it properly the first time around. Otherwise, you can be wasting time and it will take longer. We've already identified building phases, marathons, not sprints. They already take a long period of time, and you have to be patient. So we don't want to then add extra time onto that because we're not doing it correctly. So find your maintenance. Then from there, once you've adapted to your maintenance and you understand the maintenance and you're consistent, just bump them up just past maintenance, because then you know for sure you've got enough food coming in. Once you've nailed that, particularly if you're a beginner, the next thing I would then focus on is protein and making sure that you're eating enough protein. So who would like to speak on protein and the required amounts?
Alrighty. Well, I love a bit of nutrition science talk.
This
So
is definitely up your alley.
yeah. So the recommendations is I'd go like 1.8 grams of protein per kilo body weight and up to 2.5 as the max. So I think a lot of people without tracking, they're probably hitting a lot under that. 1.2 grams of protein per kilo body weight is the minimum that we want to be getting as in general. But then if we want to be building muscle, we want to be up to that 1.8 to 2.5 as a max.
Yeah. And so, how would someone who is a beginner that doesn't even understand anything you just said understand how to eat more protein and get to that?
Look, tracking it is going to help provide so much education, understanding, and I guess like your own experimenting of what's in the food that you eat. So downloading apps like MyFitnessPal and starting to enter in the food that you eat, and it will require some work. It's going to require weighing your food. It's going to require scanning barcodes or doing some research before you eat out at places. But I think it is really beneficial to do if you do have that specific goal of building and so when we track, we're going to be building our own database and figuring out what works for our own bodies.
Yeah. And like gaining confidence in that area. Because if you don't know nutrition, but you're not willing to learn nutrition, then you're never going to know it. So then you're always just going to kind of like think about, I guess, like trying to navigate it, but it's going to just leave you super, super unconfident. Is unconfident a word?
Yeah.
I feel like
Is it?
because I said unconfident twice already, and I feel like that's just not the right way to say it.
I would just say not confident. I
Yeah.
think.
Okay. Anyway, that was an interesting segue. But yeah, it's like understanding that if you're not willing to learn, you're never going to know. And then I'm sorry, but you can't complain about not knowing and not getting to a goal if you're not willing to learn. That's the number one thing that I cannot stand is when people are like, oh, it's all too hard. I don't know. It's really, and they whinge and complain about it, but they're not willing to put the work in. It's like, okay, if you had 5 friends riding a bike and you wanted to learn to ride a bike so you could ride with your friends, but then you weren't willing to get on a bike and learn to ride one, do you think you're ever going to be able to ride a bike?
Exactly.
It's the
That's a great
same fucking
analogy.
thing. I don't know. That just kind of came out of nowhere.
It's beautiful.
No, that was perfect because it's not just about nutrition or it's not just about training. It actually has to do with everything in life. And like I said this the other week, is like how you do one thing is how you do everything. So if you're not willing to put in the effort to actually go towards your goal, then what else are you not doing?
Yeah, and like, is it really worth you complaining about because you're choosing not to? And the only reason I'm bringing this up is because I hear time and time again that nutrition is too hard. It doesn't make sense. It's too time consuming. It's this, it's that, it's this. And it's like, okay, how many other things are you saying that about in your life? And when are you finally going to decide to actually do something about it? Or are you just going to stay the same and keep complaining? Because like that's going to do nothing for you. Now, the reason I brought that up as well is because if there are still people out there who are like, well, Crystal, I don't want to track. And also there could be people out there who, this is a completely different topic, but know that tracking isn't good for them. Maybe they've got some like disordered eating patterns, or they know that there's just some things or reasons in their life as to why tracking might not be the right step for them. What other options are there?
In that case, it would come down to, I guess, how many, like, so figuring out your meals in a day and then building those meals with a protein source, a carb, and a healthy fat. And if going off the Australian dietary guidelines, if you're going off it visually, a piece of meat is serving is like the size of your fist. Palm, that's it.
Size of your palm.
Yep, close enough. Or if we're going off like our plate being like at least a quarter of our plate as well. And hopefully that will be enough protein for that person. Although, as we said, everybody is different. But if tracking can be triggering, just making sure you're getting a quality protein source in each meal.
Yeah, I've also got another option for you if you don't want to track. Get a coach and get a meal plan. Because we do meal plans at Within Reach. Just quick little plug in there. That we do meal plans as well, because we understand that it is not one size fits all. And if you are somebody who's like, I think a meal plan would be better suited for me and my lifestyle, or I am not willing to track, but I am willing to try something else, maybe a meal plan is your go-to. But if even that doesn't feel safe for you or doesn't feel comfortable for you, I think the visual way to do it is really good, because again, for beginners or people who are a little bit overwhelmed by it all, because we're not like, we understand that it can feel overwhelming. Like we understand it can feel really overwhelming, particularly if you've never done it before. You're a little bit nervous. There's information flying left, right, and center. We get it. We get it. We've all been there. Visually is a really good way to start. So the quarter plate rule I love. So as you said, like a quarter of your plate protein, and then you'll have a quarter of your plate be like carbohydrates that are like higher calorie carbohydrates. So these are like potato, bread, rice, pasta, that sort of thing. And then the other half of your plate is veg. That's a really good way to visually look at it. Or the other one is, going off of your hands. So we actually have a post somewhere in our app about this, but visually, if you're like, where do I start? So your palm is the meat. Your hands like this is, and for those of you who can't see me right now, I'm putting my hands together in like a praying position.
Or
Like
a
begging position
Oh my
kind
God,
of.
it's Oliver.
Okay.
Yeah, please have some more. Yeah. Oh God, that's an old movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, that should be like your. God, sorry, I'm just laughing at myself. That should be your like veggies serving, and then oils to cook in is your thumb. I think that's about it. But like visually is a really good way to start as well, because you can look at it from a perspective of what's a slow start, because you've got to, it's baby steps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, one step
One step.
forward. I don't know. Let's move on to training, Steph, as you mentioned. Tell us a bit more about what someone or where someone can start on their training.
Okay, cool. So if you are wanting to start a building phase, or you're in a building phase right now and you're doing HIIT, you're doing lots and lots of cardio with no resistance training, or you're in group fitness, you need to get out of there. And the reason for that is because building phases require resistance training. They require a type of resistance training. I'm not saying that you can't build muscle and still do cardio and still do HIIT workouts and that sort of thing. Is it optimal though? No, it's not optimal. Is it possible? Yes. But if you're doing that, particularly if you're somebody who's never done a build before, would not recommend. That should be for, and again, it comes back to your intention behind it. So for example, you, Ant, I know that you've built and run at the same time.
Yep.
You're a bit more advanced though, and also you know what you're doing, you're eating more food. Generally though, is that optimal? No. So we need to be resistance training or strength training, and resistance training is weights. So if you're doing these booty band workouts at home with 10 squat jumps and banded abductions, and like, it's not going to help. It's not going to do anything for you. It's a great starting point. And don't get me wrong, there is nothing wrong with doing a body weight home workout if your intention is to work out for health, or work out for fun, or work out because it's good for your mental health. This is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about if you are specifically wanting to build. In that instance, you need to be in a gym, or at least have access to equipment at home. You need to be resistance training and progressively overloading consistently, which is increasing your weight over the course of a program. And you also need to be making sure that you're doing quality repetitions, which means that not only are you going heavier, but you're training with like a good level of intensity. Because the other thing is, you don't want to walk into a gym and just do 8 reps of a leg press and you're not even breaking a sweat. Like, that is also wasting time.
Yeah. And ideally anywhere between 60 to 80% of intensity to be
Yes.
so like
Yeah.
within your 1 rep max.
Yeah. So what we do at Within Reach, and what you guys can also apply to your own training if you're following a program, and if you're not, you should be. That's another thing about building phases. We'll go into that. Is like, so we do 4-week program blocks for our clients. That's the minimum you should be doing a program block for. And I think we spoke about this in a previous podcast. But like minimum 4 weeks, you can go up to like 10 or 12 weeks on a block. The reason we don't is because we want clients to not get bored, and the more consistent they are, the better. But basically the way I explain it is like, week 1 is get to know your program week. This is the week where you might pull the intensity back just a little bit to find your weights, find what works, get a feel for the program, and understand like, how hard can I push? Particularly if you're doing new variations you haven't done before or haven't done in a while. And then week 2, you build from that. You go, right, last week I did say 50 kilos on a leg press, felt pretty good. It didn't feel too hard. So I'm going to push it up a little bit this week, and you find a weight that's challenging, but you can maintain. And then week 3, you build off that. Week 4, you build off that. If your program goes longer than 4 weeks, you just build off that, build off that, build off that. Is that going to happen every single week? No. In a perfect world, we can increase weight every single week, but that's not always possible.
Well, yeah, having a great example of what progressive overload is, but we can also do progressive overload in other ways other than increasing our weight. We can also do it by increasing our reps. So staying at the same weight, increasing the reps, or it could also be time under tension. And this is where tempo comes in really handy. So if you're going for a 2010 tempo, increasing that to 4010. So increasing how long that muscle is under the tension, which is going to help it get stronger. So whilst it may not feel like you're on the way, you're like, oh, I've still only done 40 kilos, but knowing that your muscle has been under tension for longer.
Yeah, so either way, it needs to be some type of progression. Weight's the most important one, but I love that you brought that up because I actually didn't even think to mention that. So yeah, like you can increase sets, increase reps, increase tempo. That's another thing actually. So many people don't understand tempo. It's okay if you don't, but you need to learn it. Just going in there and pushing reps as quickly as you can isn't helpful. When you slow things down, the longer your muscle's under tension for, not just the better it's going to be for like the muscle being under tension, but you can also control your movement better and like really focus on mind to muscle connection.
Yeah, it's a big one that I see where people just want to get the reps out as fast as they can and think that's the best way. I'm like, slow it down. And then they're like, oh, wow, that was so much harder. I was like, I know.
You're telling me.
Yeah.
So that's a few parts about, training. Is there anything else that we haven't mentioned yet?
In the way of training, no, not specifically.
Oh, yeah, actually, we didn't talk about, unless there's something you wanted to speak on, just how important it is to have like a proper program to track all of this stuff.
Well, definitely, yeah. We can dive into that a little bit deeper, and I'm sure all of us have our own input on that as well.
Yeah.
I would say definitely what really helped me is like with a program, not only can I ensure that I am progressively overloading because I can look back at past sessions, but also follow it and know that it's going to get me to my goal rather than just sort of going in and hoping that it works because, again, there is no structure.
Yeah, like random workouts.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, was there anything else you were going to mention before I rudely interrupted?
No.
Okay, cool. I just found you were saying something and I was like, wait, hang on, I have an idea.
There was something there, but I completely forgot.
I'm sorry. That's
fine.
my fault. Yeah, but you're right. Like going into the gym, like, what am I going to do today? I don't know. And then you might hit like a leg press and a leg extension, and then you leave the gym and then you don't do that exercise for another 4 weeks because, you know, you didn't remember that you even did it last week. Like there's no structure. That's not helpful for progression. And so if you are wanting to go into a building phase, you're only going to get so far with no structure in your training. Don't get me wrong. In the beginning, yeah, you probably can make progress without a structured program. Eventually you're going to plateau. Eventually you're not going to see any more progress and you're going to go, why is this not working anymore? It was working before. Well, guys, we have to remember that the body adapts. So there's a saying that I love, what's gotten you to where you are is not going to get you to where you want to go or not going to get you to where you're going, right? So whatever we've done to get us to this point is not going to be the thing that's going to help us move to the next point. If you want to progress, you want to get better, you want to get faster, you want to get stronger, you want to build, you want to lose weight, whatever it is, whatever's gotten you to where you are now is not going to get you to where you want to go next. So you have to know that when the body adapts, particularly in the sense of building, eventually you're going to need to bring in some more structure or a better approach to help you move the needle forward a little bit quicker, or not quicker, wrong word, better, a little better.
Yeah. Tracking is going to be your best friend throughout this process, and also come from like a psychological aspect too. You might feel like, oh, I haven't gotten anywhere, but if you haven't tracked it, how would you know?
Such a great point. You're right. Do you mean like everything?
Well, yeah. If someone's just going in and just winging it, and then if they're having a really down daily thing, I love like with our clients and working with that, we have our set programming, and if they are having a down day, I can be like, look at what you were doing 6 months ago and look at you now. And if someone's not tracking, you wouldn't have that data to look back on.
Yeah, just in the way of their progression, the way that they feel in themselves and the way that they look in themselves as well.
Yeah, because you're so right. Like how much of what we well, hang on, let me start again. Backtrack, Steph. So if our thoughts create our feelings and our feelings create our actions because humans act off emotion, right? Which I love explaining this. So I'm going to say that again. If our thoughts create our feelings, which they do, and we action things based on our feelings, right? If you're feeling down, you could self-sabotage and then decide to go off track or not follow through or, you know, not go to the gym that day or eat like shit that day or whatever it is. And when you're in a down state of thinking, oh, I haven't made any progress, and then self-sabotaging it, and you have data to go back and look at, you can actually pull yourself out of that emotion because it's going to allow you to actually look at it from a logical perspective of what's true and what's real. Because I do find we live in our heads and we live in so much of our emotion that sometimes what we think is reality is not reality. Oh, I've gained weight. Oh, I've lost weight. I'm following through. I'm not following through. I'm making progress. I'm not making progress. And then when you've got data points, you can actually see the facts because the data doesn't lie. Like data doesn't lie. Facts don't lie. If you're finding yourself running around like a headless chicken because your emotions all over the place and you feel that one day you're making progress, the next day you're not making progress, then you're on track, then you're off track. Go back to the data because the data will take the emotion out of it and allow you to actually focus on what's reality. Mic drop, boom.
Yeah. Round of applause.
So yeah, I feel like that's a definite, definitely a lot that we've covered with the building phases today. So we've spoken about like the training, the nutrition. We've spoken about like the understanding of a building phase. Is there anything else you guys wanted to touch on that we haven't mentioned yet?
I think we covered a lot.
Yeah. Basically, yeah, it will depend on the. That's all right, because I was going to ask what to do after a building phase.
Oh
although
yeah,
it's going to be dependent
the
on
reversing.
yeah.
Reversing. Okay, that's a great point. I love that you answered the question for yourself before you asked it to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did say earlier on in the podcast that we'll go through a reverse, but come to think of it, I actually think reversing needs to be its own episode.
Definitely,
Yeah.
What do you reckon?
I think its own episode.
Yeah, because I think what we don't want to do is we don't want to give too much information or confuse anyone. So if you are somebody right now who wants to build, this is the perfect episode for you. If you're somebody right now who wants to go through a fat loss phase or a dieting phase, go back to, I think it's episode 4. Is it episode 4? Episode 4, and listen to the fat loss phase, and that will help you understand that. And then we'll make sure we do an episode on reversing so that no matter what phase you're at in your journey, you've got a podcast that can support you along the way. Are you guys happy with that?
100%, yeah.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Well, thanks for the chat today, guys. Love to hear your insights, and I hope that everyone at home, enjoyed it as well. We would love for you guys to share our podcast, leave a review, let us know what you're enjoying, if there's any feedback you've got for us, and any topics that you'd love to hear us talk about in the future. But otherwise, thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
And we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.
See ya.